Let's have a look at the tufgaming X870-Plus Wi-Fi Motherboard. ASUS has stepped up the quality and DIY convenience. So let's get this motherboard unboxed and have a closer look. This mid-tier budget-friendly motherboard has all the features we need for our gaming PC. Check out the aesthetics of the I/O shroud and ECH heatsink. The motherboard is designed to meet the needs of high core count CPUs. It features 16 plus 2 plus 1 power stages. It has an 8 multi-layer printed circuit board design that quickly dissipates heat around the voltage regulators to improve overall system stability. Military-grade components such as TUF chokes deliver rock-solid power to the CPU. TUF 5K black metallic capacitors provide 52% wider temperature tolerance and a 2.5x longer lifespan than standard motherboard capacitors. Compared to traditional power inputs, ASUS ProCool connectors are built to tight specifications to ensure full contact with the PSU power cables. The resulting lower impedance helps prevent hotspots and connector failure. This motherboard supports up to 160 MHz bandwidth in the 6 GHz band. The new antenna provides up to 18% signal improvement on 5 and 2.4 GHz and up to 6% for the 6 GHz. We get 2.5 GB onboard LAN connections. This motherboard features QLED that helps users troubleshoot by indicating the status of the system during post. Okay, on the back panel we get two USB 4 Type-C 40 gigabits per second ports, one would dub as a display port, 3 USB 10 gigabit ports, 4 USB 5 gigabit ports, 1 USB 2.0, 1 HDMI. Okay, for connectivity we have two front USB 2.0 headers, and for the front panel we get one USB 5 gigabits per second and one USB 20 gigabits per second. There are a total of 8 4-pin PWM DC fan headers, one for an AIO pump, and one that supplies 3 amps for high-performance PWM or DC water pumps for custom loops. For storage, we have 4 M.2 slots, 2 support up to Gen 5 and 2 support up to Gen 4. There are also 2 SATA ports. There are 3 addressable Gen 2 RGB headers that will support up to 500 LEDs on Gen 2 RGB devices. Now let's have a look at bifurcation. M.2 slot 1 is native, meaning it does not share any bandwidth with any other devices. If you use slot 2, you will reduce the bandwidth of your GPU by half. Also, if you use both of the Gen 4 slots, it will disable the bottom PCIe slot. For convenience is one of my favorite features, PCIe slot key release. Attaching a Wi-Fi antenna to your PC is now easy and fast. Instead of slowly rotating 2 fasteners until they finally lock in, they just snap into place. Q-Latch makes it easy to install or remove an M.2 SSD without the need of specific tools or screws. Now let's have a look at some of the software features of the tufgaming X870-Plus Wi-Fi motherboard. So the first thing you'll notice when you're in the UEFI BIOS is how clear it looks at 1080p. A new feature introduced to the X870 and Z890 motherboards is Q-Dashboard. Q-Dashboard simplifies motherboard configuration by clearly displaying hardware connections and corresponding BIOS settings, making system setup more convenient. Notice on the bottom right corner you can change display to show all or specific hardware. A really cool feature that I just noticed is that you can choose the Q fan control source. For example, if you want certain fans to ramp up because your CPU is warm, versus if you want them to ramp up if your GPU is warm. So, really cool feature. Alright, another feature that's new to ASUS is called the ASUS Driver Hub. Once you have completed the Windows installation, you'll notice it pop up on the bottom right hand corner. Once installed, you will be linked to the website where you will find all the available drivers, software such as Army Crate, CPUZ, and many other useful utilities. You can also find all your system specs, BIOS firmware version. You can set the Driver Hub app to notify you when new drivers and BIOS versions are available. Okay, now that I've got my drivers installed, let's set up our overclock on our RAM. First thing we'll need to do is disable onboard graphics. Since I will not be using onboard graphics, I'll turn that off so we can recover some RAM that it deserves. Looks like it increased a little bit from 31.1 GB to 31.6. Setting up your RAM overclock is very easy on the ASUS TUF X870 motherboard. I'll go over the process of how to set up and test your overclock. Okay, so head over to Advanced Mode, AI Tweaker, choose the pre-configured ASUS DOCP profile. I like to start with a mild overclock and test. Then you can increase frequency or tighten up the timers to decrease latency. Okay, now save and exit and reboot. Make sure that the system posts and confirm the speeds that you chose. An unstable overclock can damage your Windows operating system and corrupt files, so it's best to use memtest86. I run about 5 to 10 loops just to make sure we're stable. After your tests pass, then you're safe to boot into the Windows operating system. Now, after a quick mem test in the Windows operating system, it looks like I'm good to go for some game testing. Alright, and finally let's just run a benchmark test with Black Ops 6. Well, I'm pretty happy with those numbers. The ASUS TUF X870-Plus Wi-Fi Motherboard is by far the best tufgaming AM5 motherboard to date. Really appreciate the PCDIY features such as Q latch, M.2 latch, and Q antenna. I hope you enjoyed this build and episode in partnership with ASUS.